Go, Fritz.
The Bears are who we thought they were.
The Bears. The Bears.
I am the great Cornholio.
We'll see what happens.
Playoffs?
See, Sean McDonough, Jay Billis. Goats!
Can you play a song? Something cool. Put my mic on!
I'm calling both games.
Oh, baby!
Are you serious?
Goes down the field for Smith.
Oh, he got it!
Seattle. We're getting ready for Cincinnati.
0-2 teams that need, that I think still have a shot of turning their season around. There's only 3, and there's a fair amount of 0-2 teams. There's Colts, Giants, and Jets, right? But there's also Jaguars, and let me pull it up real quick, but because I don't have it off the top of my head. But the Colts are a team that I think they can turn it around because if you look at their division, right? Yes, they're 0-2, but guess who else is 0-2 in their division? The Jacksonville Jaguars. And you look at after last night, the Texans fall to 1-2 on the season, right? And the team now in first place of that division is the Tennessee Titans. And if the Colts are going to turn around their season, it starts this week because they play in Tennessee. So if they win that game, I believe they would be in first place of the division. I believe. I'm not sure how the tiebreaker would go down between them and Houston, but you look at that division, and right now, obviously, the Titans are the favorite of that division. But they're 1-1, and they haven't looked super sharp. They're being outscored 68-46 in the first 2 weeks of the season. They didn't look very good against Arizona, a team that maybe you want to look out for, right? But they came back and looked pretty strong against Seattle, and they're yet to play a conference game. So this will be their first conference game and first division game of the year against Indianapolis. So, but in Indianapolis, it's a tough thing for them to turn it around this week, right? Not only because they're coming in with a new coach, a new quarterback. I'm sorry, not new coach. What am I talking about? New quarterback. Excuse me. And anytime you get a new quarterback, it's going to take some time to kind of get the system together, kind of gel with everybody on the team. And Carson Wentz, right? He's a guy that he's hasn't really had a good season in a while, and now we're only going into week 3, and he's already having issues. Not only issues with executing, excuse me, but also issues with his injuries. He's not only did he hurt one ankle last week, but he hurt both of his ankles, and now they're saying he's questionable for this week, and they need a quarterback if they're going to beat Tennessee, because if they don't beat Tennessee, now they fall to 0-3, and now you kind of look at them and say, okay, their season is pretty much over. But Carson Wentz, he hasn't even gotten over 500 passing yards this season. He's at 498, and he's got 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, not terrible. He's been sacked 6 times. And we know that he had an issue with that when he was with Philadelphia, being sacked a lot, especially last year. That was one of the big issues when they went to, or one of the big comparisons when they went to Hurts, is that, wow, look at this, Wentz got sacked, I forget exactly how many times, but it was a lot, is the point. And they switched to Hurts, and Hurts didn't get sacked nearly as much as Wentz did in comparable action. So, Carson Wentz is a guy that maybe you look at and say, is he on the back end of his career? But right, it doesn't matter whether he's on the back end of his career or not, right? You could say the same thing for Tom Brady, and he's led his team to a Super Bowl last year, and now he's off to a 2-0 start. You could say the same thing about Ben Roethlisberger, and he's led his team to a 1-1 start, leading his team back against the Bills. You could say the same thing about Matthew Stafford. Is he at the tail end of his career? He's led the Rams, a new team, albeit, remember what I said earlier, being on a new team is always tough because you got to have that period where you kind of get to know each other or whatever and gel. He's led a new team, mind you, to a 2-0 start. Teddy Bridgewater, same thing. Is he at the tail end of his career? Again, new team. I know that the Broncos have played weaker teams. We'll get to that later. But point being, new quarterback on a new team, quarterback who's been in the league a while, has bounced around. This is a common theme where there's many quarterbacks where they have bounced around, or they've either bounced around for a long time or been in the league for a long time, and yet they've led their teams to some pretty good starts. And so you can't really make that excuse for Carson Wentz. And going into the season, the big thing was Carson Wentz. Oh, he's back with Frank Reich, the coach that he did so well with in Philadelphia. And a lot of people thought, man, maybe the Colts can do something this year. And now I think we're seeing that, well, that's not really the case anymore, as the Colts are off to an 0-2 start. And, they almost beat the Rams, right? They kept it close with the Rams. But as Stephen A. Smith said about the Cowboys week one, he goes, there's no silver lining for the Cowboys because they still lost. You can't say, oh, well, it was close. Close doesn't count in the end of the season in the standings. You don't look at them and say, well, sure, they're 8-8, but hey, they almost beat the Rams in week 2. That doesn't mean anything, right? It means a little bit when you're looking at future matchups down the road and saying, well, okay, maybe they can stay competitive because this, that, and the other thing or whatever. But it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things at the end of the season. So, you can talk about almost beating the Rams all you want, but it doesn't matter. Carson Wentz, at the end of the day, he's got to start. He's really got to produce. And I'm not sure that I think Carson Wentz is probably done soon. And especially with him being hurt. They said he's questionable. I don't know if he's out or not officially. But who are they going to play? Jacob Eason? The guy who I don't even think has had an NFL start. I think he's played a little bit here and there, but not a whole lot. And I'm not confident that the Colts are going to beat the Titans this weekend. And the point being is, if they get a good quarterback, and we saw this last year with Philip Rivers, and Rivers is another guy who, he retired last year, so obviously he was at the tail end of his career, and yet he was still able to lead the Colts to a playoff spot. And it wasn't even a division-winning spot; it was a wild card spot. So, you can't. I don't think there's any really excuse that you can make for why Wentz isn't producing. And again, it's not like there's not decent talent around him. They've got solid running backs. They've got solid receivers. Their defense is good. They have a solid team, and we saw that last year. Not a whole lot has changed since last year. So, they have decent talent. I think. I still give them time to turn this thing around. They played 2 good teams to start the season, Seattle and the LA Rams. So maybe you can give them a little slack on that. But, it's not a tough division, so that's why I think they can turn this thing around. But I think this weekend for them in Tennessee is, I don't want to say it's a must-win, but it's about as close as it gets. So I think the Colts are an 0-2 team that have a chance to turn it around. Another team that I think has a chance to turn around. The Colts, I think, are the... Like, if you divide all the teams that are 0-2 and who has the best chance to turn it around, the Colts are the front runner for me. Second place, who has the best chance to turn this thing around? For me, it's the New York Giants. And again, that is just because of their division. And, possibly one of the worst divisions in NFL history. At least it was last year. I'm not sure how it's going to shape up this year, but point being, in the last few years, the division hasn't been the most competitive. It's been competitive, but for a 6-win team, for 6-win teams, it's been competitive. Not a lot of great competition there. The Giants have some decent players. They've got Darius Slayton, they've got Saquon Barkley, who's really good, but Daniel Jones is, or Danny Dimes, I guess you could call him, right? That whole thing. I'm still not a big fan of that. I don't understand why you would go out and get that trademark name of Danny Dimes when you haven't done squat in the NFL yet? When has Danny Dimes led the Giants to an NFC Championship? When has Danny Dimes done anything relevant other than possibly win a weak division? I don't even know if he's done that. But Danny Dimes didn't do anything. So, I mean, that's like me going out before I'm even like making CBS Sports or Fox Sports or ESPN or whatever. That's like me going out and getting a trademark on Mike's Madness before I even do anything relevant in the sports broadcasting industry. It doesn't make sense. I haven't proved myself really yet. I haven't had the chance. So I'm not going to go out and make it out to be like I'm some kind of big shot. But that's what Daniel Jones does. And he hasn't done really anything. He hasn't done anything except fumble the ball and blow games for the Giants. They may not be the best, but they're not the worst team in the league either. Again, not a tough division, as I said. But, and last week, right, they're 0-2 going into week 3. They're playing the Falcons this week. They're, what was it? They were offside, I think, on the game-winning kick in Washington last week. They're one play away from being 1-1, and then you look ahead to this week and saying, man, they could win that game as well. So, they're one play away from possibly being, a 2-1 team, and things all of a sudden look it makes a whole world of difference for the New York Giants. But I think Daniel Jones, and I understand that what lost them the game last week wasn't necessarily Daniel Jones, but I mean, look, last week they said Daniel Jones was, I think, 4-0 against Washington in the last 4 games or whatever. But he was 0-5 in primetime games, and now he's 0-6. So, I mean, the point is, like, sure, 4-0 against one team is great, right? That you beat them 4 times in a row or whatever. But that's against one team. Being 0-5 in all of primetime games, that is a much more relevant stat than being 4-0 against one team out of 31 other teams in the league. So, as I've said before, I don't think Daniel Jones is the answer for New York. But he's not awful. He's not great, though. And so, you take a look at Daniel Jones this year, and, he's right around where Carson Wentz is. He's got 516 passing yards on the year, 2 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. But the issues with him is not his. But again, he's another one of those guys that's been sacked a lot. He's been sacked 6 times already going into week 3. That means on average he's been sacked 3 times a game. And so and for there's a difference between Carson Wentz averaging sacked 3 times a game and Daniel Jones being sacked 3 times a game. Because Daniel Jones is supposed to be a more mobile guy than Carson Wentz. I mean, not supposed to be, but he is. And so for that more mobile guy to get sacked 6 times in 2 weeks, I don't know that that's necessarily something. I'm not sure that that's necessarily a promising stat. And I'm looking here at guys that have been sacked the most in the league, and 6 is a pretty high number, right? There are only 2 guys here that I see that are higher than that, and that's Ryan Tannehill at 9 and Zach Wilson at 10. And I think there was like 4 or 5 of those sacks for Tannehill in week 1. And Zach Wilson, we all know the story with the Jets starting offensive line. But 6 is a more common number than I would have thought. Sam Darnold is 6, but that's 6 sacks for Sam Darnold in 3 games. Because remember, they played last night. So you got Russell Wilson's been sacked 6 times, Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz, and Joe Burrow's been sacked 9 times as well. My bad. So. But you take a look at those high those higher number of sacks, and there's a common theme there. It's either the weak offensive line or they played a really good team week 1. The Giants, it's just the fact that their offensive line isn't very good, but also Daniel Jones' decision making isn't the best. And I always hear the hype on Daniel Jones, and I just don't buy it. So I don't think Daniel Jones is the answer. And if the Giants were in any other division than the NFC least, I would say that the Giants have no chance of making any sorts of comeback this year. But because they're in one of the worst divisions in NFL history, you can't ever, they're not done by any means. They still have a realistic chance at winning that division, even though they're 0-2. But I don't think it's going to be as easy this year as it was last year, right? Because the Cowboys, if they stay healthy, they could be really good. The Eagles, I think, are going to surprise a lot of people. And Washington is kind of that team that nobody really knows what to think about, especially now that they're without Fitzpatrick right now. But the Giants, you look at that team and you're like, well, not much has changed since last year, and I just don't know. I don't know what's different about them this year than last year that makes you say, okay, they actually have a realistic shot at winning the division, right? Every other team in that division has improved, or gone out and changed the outlook of their team, except for New York. And, Washington did probably the second least, and that's just because they got a new quarterback, and, they've made some moves, right? But, other guys, or other team, like the Eagles and Cowboys, I think have not, the Cowboys haven't even changed a lot, they just got healthy. The Eagles changed a lot. And, right now I think the Eagles and Cowboys are teams that are, Cowboys I think are always going to get hyped up, but Eagles might surprise a lot of guys. And I just don't know how, I just don't see a world where the Giants come back and win that division. But again, with that division's always crazy, so I don't want to come out and say they have no realistic shot. The Jets, I'm not too serious about them. They showed some potential in the second half of the Panthers game week 1, but they did get pretty embarrassed in week 2 against New England. So there's that. But yet again, due to their division, right? The Bills are the obvious front runners, but the Bills aren't off to the greatest of starts. Josh Allen has not even broken 500 passing yards this season, and he's supposed to be, the guy that they go to the most in need, right? He's supposed to really be leading that team, and that's like saying you look at in years past, that's like saying you look at Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady, or again in years past, Brett Favre or Joe Namath, and 2 weeks in he hasn't even passed 500 passing yards. Like, just for sake of argument, Patrick Mahomes is already at 680 passing yards, and Tom Brady's not far behind at 655. Josh Allen, you got to scroll all the way down, and I don't even see him on this first page. So that tells you all you need to know about that. Josh Allen is all the way down here at okay, I guess I didn't write that in there. But anyway, the point being, he hasn't even broken 500 passing yards this season, and he has yet to have a game over 300 yards. The week 1, he actually had more passing yards in the week 1 loss to Pittsburgh, where they only scored 16 points. Last week, they shut out the Dolphins 35-0, and he only racked up 179 passing yards, which I was shocked to find out. And, the Steelers, to look at the Steelers game, and you think, man, the Steelers kind of shut him down a little bit, right? The Steelers held him down, and he didn't look all that great. Well, he actually had more passing yards in that game than they did in the Dolphins game. And the Dolphins game, the team looked, they shut him out. But you look at the throws in the Dolphins game, and Josh Allen looked really off target. There were a lot of guys diving to the ground to catch the ball. There were a lot, the wide receivers had to really make an effort to reel the ball in to catch the ball. And when there's a guy that should be an MVP front runner, he should be making, and these are guys that on the highlights that I watched from the game and during the game, that they're wide open and he just is off target. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just a rough start to the season for him. But point being that the Bills have not looked as great as I would have expected them. And then the Dolphins and Patriots are very beatable as well. The Dolphins, obviously, right now they lost Tua. I'm not sure when he's going to come back. He's got that rib injury that Drew Brees missed a lot of time with last year, or was it 2 years ago? I think it was last year. And the Patriots right now, they're going into a new quarterback with Mac Jones. The Patriots are very beatable as well. You may not have thought that last week when they destroyed the Jets, but it's not impossible. Like, second place in the AFC East is not something where you say, man, that's tough. We're going to have to play a lot of good football. Patriots obviously are going to be a tougher out than the Dolphins, but the Jets, if they get it together, and they can string more play together like they did at the second half of week 1, then I think maybe they got something. So, and I know Zach Wilson looks really bad, like really, really bad in week 2, but don't give up on him yet. Because, again, young quarterback, second start ever in the NFL, playing, Albert Einstein over there on the Patriots sideline. Cut him some slack, all right? He's they're playing, who are they playing this week? I can't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, Zach Wilson, point being, give him some time. I think let him develop a little bit, and he could be good. So the Jets, I wouldn't totally count out just yet, but they're close. Any other 0-2 team that I mentioned, no, it's over. They're done. They're not doing anything this season. I hate to say it, but that's the truth. They're done. And can you imagine how demoralizing it must be for your season to pretty much be over only in week 2? You got 14 or 15.